Well, welcome everybody. Let me go over. I understand whenever we have technology that sometimes there's glitches. We were getting messages that some of the Zoom versions that people were using were older and maybe not supporting. We are going to do the best we can to give the information we have tonight for you. What I want to tell you first is that thank you to the request of South Tacoma Neighborhood Council. We do have some interpreters with us here, some translators here with us tonight. We have available Korean, Spanish, Vietnamese, Mandarin, Russian. We were hoping for Cambodian, but we are having difficulties with that particular translator. And that was part of the delay, was we were hoping to get that running. But you should see, I'm going to go back over to Zoom for a minute. You should see a button at the bottom of your screen that says interpretation, and then it looks like a world above it. You can click on that button and select the translation that you would like during this meeting. And you can do that anytime. So I would encourage you, if you want to use that service, to go ahead and start using that. And then let's go back to now that we've given that part. Tonight's public meeting is regarding the Bridge Industrial Project, permit number LU21-0125. My name is Jana Magoon. I am the Land Use Division Manager in Planning and Development Services for the City of Tacoma. One of the questions that came up before the meeting was, long before the meeting, was if I would be the decision maker. I am not. I am the person facilitating tonight's meeting. And I will also be managing the time clock when we get to the public comment period. So I'm managing multiple screens and going to do my best to again, avoid any technical problems. I have with me tonight helping us with the technology, Mary Crabtree and Christy Dahl. They will be monitoring when it comes time for public comment. They will be monitoring the raised hands and be muting and unmuting people so that they can speak and provide comments. Also here is Shirley Schultz. Shirley is processing the application, and tonight we'll be giving a brief presentation of the project, the permits under review, and the process. We also tonight have with us a representative of the South Tacoma Neighborhood Council. That would be Heidi Stevens. She will give a short introduction about the Neighborhood Council and its role with the city and the community. The last presentation tonight will be given by a representative of the Bridge Industrial Project, and this person will provide a brief presentation of the project itself. I already mentioned that many of us are managing multiple screens, so you might see lots of heads going multiple different directions. We are, I promise you, completely engaged, just trying to check what's going on various screens. The format for tonight is the presentation, so my introduction, then the presentations, followed by public comment. One thing that's a little bit different tonight, as to support translation services, we will be taking a 10-minute break every 30 minutes. The first break, however, will be a bit, we can go a bit longer. It is our hope that we will get to the end of all the presentations, then take our first break. And then when we come back, we can start with public comments. The most important part of tonight's meeting is hearing from you all. The city supports and embraces public engagement, especially during the permit process. So the purpose of the public meeting tonight is to, as I just said, to give you all an opportunity to verbally provide comments on the project. You can also use the question and answer section to provide comments, or put questions in there. We are not answering questions live tonight. We will be collecting all the questions, disseminating them to anybody to the appropriate people to answer them, and then we will be uploading responses to questions onto the website that's been established for this project. Speaking of the project, the city has established that it is an allowed use. We are currently and this is why you are all here, evaluating the environmental impacts to determine what mitigation and or additional studies are needed. Though we're generally going to accept any comments you want to give us during the 3 minutes that you have, the most impactful comments will be about your concerns related to the environment, such as truck traffic, noise, water quality, air quality, those types of things. Questions can be, as I just said, questions can be asked verbally by raising your hand, or in the question and answer format. As I mentioned tonight, we're using that as a comment tool, a written comment tool, or if you want to provide questions, we will collect those and respond at a later date. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak tonight. Before starting to speak, please provide your name for the record. I'll remind people as we move along. Probably the second most important thing, the first being that people have an opportunity to comment, but the second most important thing is that this be a safe place for people to comment. We know that people that are attending tonight are going to be passionate about the project. We would expect that. However, we do not allow or accept any bullish behavior, no swearing, no name calling, etc. will be allowed. So this is a public forum where you can provide comments about concerns you have related to the environmental impact on this project. But please remember to be polite, be respectful of other people's comments. We may find throughout the meeting that people have different concerns and opinions, and I just ask that this be a respectful place and for people to feel safe. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Shirley Schultz from the city of Tacoma to do her presentation. Oh, I think I forgot. I'm so sorry. The presentations in order today will be Shirley Schultz giving the presentation, and then Heidi, and then the representative of Bridge International. Sorry if I repeated myself. Shirley Schultz.
Thank you, Jana. As is usual, Jana's already covered like 80% of what I was going to cover. So that's great. My name is Shirley Schultz. I'm a principal planner in Planning and Development Services. And as Jana noted, I am the staff person assigned to process this permit and work with the decision makers as they make a decision. I saw the question come up. The decision maker in this case is Peter Huffman, the Director of Planning and Development Services. And he makes a decision in cooperation with other department heads, city attorney, and reviewing agencies. And I'll get into more detail that way. The other thing I want to note is I've had audio problems with my computer. So if you see me make a bad face and drop everything, it's because I'm moving over to my phone, but I'll do my best to do that gracefully and seamlessly. Here's the basic outline of my staff presentation. It's not as long as it looks. I like to start with a background on planning and permitting, just so we have some context of where we are, and then get into the proposal, where we are with the permit review, and what the next steps are. So this is a process flow for planning and permitting, how land use decisions are made and how development takes place in the city of Tacoma. I've divided it into 2 slides. The planning side of things is that long range work that is done by the Planning Commission and the City Council with public input, a lot of public input, workshops, outreach, multiple public hearings. And the timeline on that is they are usually looking out 20 to 40 years with a plan. After that, they develop the code. So that's our zoning code, sometimes the building code, other development codes that are all based on the planning documents. Once we have a code in place, we get into the permitting process, which is where we are now. So that's permit review. And that's when someone has a development proposal and we look at it and say, does it meet those adopted plans and policies? Does it meet the adopted code? So when someone applies for a permit, they turn in a bunch of information that shows how they do or don't meet the code. Once everything's okay, they get permission to build, and we would go into a construction phase. And that's when inspectors go out, oops, accidentally hit something. So inspectors go out and make sure that something is actually getting built according to plan. So there's multiple steps in the process. We are right here, get over here with my mouse, right here in permit review. With permit review, once we're to this side of things, there's less public input, especially if there isn't any kind of optional permit involved or special permission that the applicant is requesting. So that gets to this request. Bridge Industrial has been working with the city since early 2021. They submitted environmental permit applications in May, and all the different city staff started their initial review. It took until about February for staff to say, we have enough information that we think that this is close enough to complete and review, and it can go out for public comment. As a side note, this is similar to a proposal that was reviewed and permitted in 2007, 2008. Different enough, and enough has changed that they are starting over essentially. Permits are considered complete from when they came in. So these guys had a complete application in February. They've also submitted for some very early development permits, but they can't be issued, like we can't even review them until all the wetland or critical area permitting and environmental reviews, all appeals and are done. Kind of to use technical terms, the Cipa review, the environmental review, and the critical area review are sometimes called entitlement permits. And so what we're looking at right now are entitled permits, and they just do that. They entitle somebody to ask for development permits. So the critical area permit and the Cipa don't actually give somebody permission to go out and move dirt or build anything. They just say, we've got you to where you can ask for those things. We also have a lot of other agencies and a lot of staff that are involved in the review. For this one, this includes the Environmental Protection Agency, the Health Department, which is the county health department, the State Department of Ecology. We've communicated with the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency, and then we have review from our fire, our building code, our public works people, and our traffic people. The site, if you're not familiar with it, I'll get to a map in a minute, is about 157 acres. It was used for heavy industrial purposes from about 1892 to about 1974. At one point, there was an airfield there. Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad used it for building train engines, doing train maintenance. So there were rail yards and things like that in there. The city's public works or public utilities building is located on a part of the site. And it extended all the way down to 56th, where it was listed when it was listed as a Superfund site. Superfund is an environmental protection agency status that says a site's dirty from whatever kinds of contaminants, things that are dangerous for people, and has to be cleaned up. So in this area, there's a whole huge website for this. In this area, the cleanup of the soils was done in 1999. They are still on the site. So a lot of the dirty dirt, as I call it, is located on the end of the site closest to Tacoma Public Utilities. And basically it's buried. So one of the ways to deal with contaminants is you can bury it, put a cap over it, and just leave it there. And that's what's there now. But because of this, there are specific conditions from the federal government about how the site can be used and how it gets developed. With this proposal, one of the things is to clear the site and add fill and move the dirt around. Then once that's done, the applicant would put in in-ground utilities. So that includes sewer, any underground power, but also stormwater management and treatment. So water runoff that comes from rain and from other properties, how it's collected and how it's kept clean. Because of the layout of the project, they will impact wetlands and a stream on the site, and possibly a biodiversity area, which is an area of natural vegetation that is associated with either the hillside or the wetland. But because of that, they will also then be doing mitigation and restoration of those impacts. Once all that is done, or during all of that, the proposal is to construct a light warehouse or a light industrial warehousing project with some big buildings, with a lot of parking and truck and trailer parking, and then some new road connections, and then also some street and intersection improvements. So looking at the current aerial photo, and I don't have a precise date on this, so don't, call me if you think it's just a little bit different now. This is the site. So up here, this is South Tacoma Way and Washington, sorry, Washington. Down at this end, oh, I have to point at the right place. I'm sorry. South Tacoma Way and Washington. Down at this end is 56. This is the edge of the Tacoma Public Utilities property. This will have a road connecting up here to 35th. Madison will also be improved, and there will be a better road, like a roadway down to 56. When you look at an aerial like this, most of this area, all this hillside, all of these trees, none of that will be impacted other than some fencing and security cleanup. Also, as part of the critical area permit, in what we call invasive species, so things like blackberry and Scotch broom would have to be removed. There may be some plantings, but most of that would happen further down on the flat area. This is the proposed site plan. And like I was saying, it's not really clear on this. You don't see the connections to 56th or up to 35th, but the main road would be this road that comes down through to Burlington Way. This road would include, so far it will include, trees, street lighting, and a 10-foot combined pedestrian sidewalk and bike path. And then this area down here would be the area where the preservation and restoration of the wetland and stream would take place. Oh, one other thing I would point out is there's a requirement. This is 50th. And so there's a requirement for a better railroad crossing there. And so that work would be done as well. So as I had mentioned before, we are looking at we are looking at a permit right now and an environmental review for the whole project. So the permit that we are out for, and this is what the public notice was for, is the critical area development permit. And I'm just going to call it CAPO. This is based in Washington law that says there are certain natural areas that need to be protected. And if you need to build in or near one of these areas, you have to either avoid impacting it, so you can't damage it, or you have to minimize your impact, or you have to, and if you do impact it, you have to mitigate for it, which means you have to replace whatever it is that you did. So in this case, the development proposes to relocate portions of the stream because they want to widen Madison Street and put a building in that part of the site. And then there are these two wetlands that have protected areas, which we call buffers, that would also be impacted. The third thing is that both the city and the state regulate floodplains, which is, in the very simplistic terms, where water gathers when we have a big storm. If that tends to happen and you build there or move dirt there, you have to make space for the water to go somewhere else in the case we have a big storm. So that would be floodplain mitigation. One thing I would say is that this is based in state law, but it's a local ordinance. So in our code, it's Title 13, Chapter 1311 of our code, which then ties back to everything else. This goes a little bit more in depth to the CAPO permit. One, I went back to that mitigation, right? You're to avoid, minimize, or mitigate so that there's no net loss of function or area. So if you have a very big wetland and you impact it, some of your mitigation might be replacing that same amount of area or more in a different location on the site or a different part of the site. Currently, the proposal says that the buffer areas would increase about 38,000 square feet over where they are. And then the area that would get restored would be about 16.5 acres. And then in order to do mitigation, they would have to build another 34,000 square feet of new wetlands. I am not a civil engineer and I am not a biologist, but what they do is they dig a new pond and they plant it with native plants. They'd also, with that restoration, tear out, again, those invasives. So there's knotweed and a lot of English ivy and things that just aren't really good for wetlands in the Northwest that would get removed. Now, this is the current proposal. It's likely to change. Right now, the permit is out for revisions. We've commented, we've said you're missing these things, you need to add these things. And so some of the specifics may change, but this is about where we are. Current proposal is that about, and this is just for the wetland area, that about 2,600 trees would be planted and about 10,500 shrubs. And again, this is all still early review. The other thing that we're doing at the same time is the Cipa review, which is the environmental review. Cipa review is conducted with every permit. So even permits that are teeny tiny, we have to look at them and make sure that they are exempt from the process requirements of Cipa. If there is another permit, it's processed in the same way. So it gets the same public notice. It goes along with the same decision package, but it might look at the whole project. So this one goes along with the wetland permit, but looks at the whole project. And so the public notice is done as the same way, which is why you got maybe originally a notice about a wetland permit and environmental review. It's a technicality of state law. When we talk about the environmental review, this is what we look at. This is information both that we as the city or other government or public agencies have on hand, or information that the applicant provides to us. But it's both the natural environment and the human environment. So natural environment, water quality, plants and animals, water. I said water again, air quality. And then the human environment is where we talk about things that would impact both health and quality of life. So that's where it's air quality, water quality, noise, light, traffic, which is, those are both health and quality of life. Housing and recreation are things that we look at under the human environment in Cipa. What we do is we require studies and documentation from the applicant for them to show us what are the impacts, how will this change these things, how can we make it better if it is an impact, how do we make that impact less, how do we make things better. So for instance, we currently have a traffic study, we have lots of stormwater information, we have soils information. We will ask for an air quality study, and I believe a lighting study is also warranted in this situation. The thing about Cipa is, it is one way where we have some input in a permit that is otherwise just an administrative permit. The state law for Cipa gives cities the ability to require changes or put conditions on a permit in order to address those impacts. So oddly enough, just like a CAPO permit, but different than a CAPO permit, these conditions are also called mitigation. And it's a little bit of a negotiation, and it is also a little bit of a science. And so there's both involved. The basic idea behind Cipa mitigation is that if there's a gap between what the development code requires and what the project impacts will be, we can put conditions on the project to fix it. So an example I always use, and if anybody's been to one of these meetings with before, I use this example, but traffic is pretty easy for people to understand. If a development comes in, and let's just say they have 100 trips, and they are going to send all of those cars onto one street, we have a traffic plan that says this street can, the way it's built right now and the way the traffic light works right now, can handle 90 trips. So that applicant would have to answer for making what the next trend trips are. So sometimes that's things like adding a turn lane, putting in a new traffic signal, changing how a traffic signal works, restricting how cars can turn. So those are the kinds of things that happen in traffic mitigation. It has to be something that's related to the project. It has to be something that the applicant can reasonably do or can have somebody do or the city can do. And then it has to be based in adopted public policy, which is why I use traffic, because we have a traffic plan that just says how we work. What it can't do is require things that are also required in other permits. So if we know that our critical areas ordinance will address all of the impacts to the stream, that's done by the critical areas permit and not under Cipa mitigation. So a lot of times we get comments about things like stormwater and why that should be mitigation, but it's already covered under stormwater ordinance. So it's a fine line. But that does bring me to the other permits that are required. So these are not permits. These are just reviews to let people get permits. The first one is the one we call a work order. That's for work in the public right of way. Here are some of the things we know right now. That's a new traffic signal at 56th and Madison, a better rail crossing at 50th, and 35th and Union would be improved so that when the trucks go up to 35th, and they have to turn to get onto Union to then go to 16. There's room for all of that to happen there. The next one, and probably the one that most people are interested in, is the site development permit. And that's the civil permit. So that's the stuff that allows you to move all the dirt around and take the plants and do the stormwater and work with the stream and the wetlands and also pave the areas that need to be paved. So again, this is based on the city's surface water management manual. That's approved and reviewed by the State Department of Ecology. We have a big national permit that for preventing stormwater contamination. So these are the things that, again, very simply, the stormwater permit says you have to manage the amount and quality of the water from runoff, and that the quality that it can't contaminate a wetland or groundwater. So if I build a building and I pave a parking lot, all the stormwater that comes off of that building or parking lot has to be managed so that it doesn't all go at once and flood the neighbor. And then it also has to be treated. So if it's got any kind of pollutants in it, that has to be taken out before it goes into a wetland. Again, not an engineer, but when they do this, they basically assume we're going to have a major flood. We're going to have a 25-year flood and we're going to have a 100-year flood, and we have to build to that condition. And those are pretty frequent. Say 25-year flood is a pretty frequent event. So they're building to that. The other things the site development permit does is allows that grade and fill, where our inspectors look at things like dust control and traffic routing and erosion control. The site development permit also then is when the landscaping and wetland work happens, and also when those utilities go on. This work is going to be done in coordination with both the Environmental Protection Agency because of the contamination on the site and the Department of Ecology through their own permitting. Everything through a site development permit is managed to avoid impacts on other properties, whether that's dust or runoff. And basically that's the bulk of the presentation. The public commenting is an early step. We have not made any decisions on the permit. We are collecting all the permits, or all the comments, and they are weighed in the decision-making process. They are all provided together to the decision makers. And we encourage written comments. I'm absolutely going to listen in and take notes with this meeting, and this meeting is recorded and will be summarized. But written comments, I think, avoid some errors that might happen in transcription. The comments should be related to what information is not addressed in the studies supplied, how impacts can or can't be mitigated through conditions on a proposal. They can also be related to how it relates to the CAPO permit, either general or specific criteria. They will be in the decision, they'll be responded to in the decision or a separate document. They may be aggregated. We've gotten a lot of the same comments. So, you know, it may not be line by line. After the close of the comment period, which is next week, they'll be forwarded to the applicant, and they will also be routed to the appropriate staff for responses. They will be addressed in the city's decision on the proposal, or like I said, in a separate document. Once the decision is issued, there's a 14-day reconsideration or appeal period, and then appeals are filed with and heard by our city's hearings examiner. The decision will have all of the appeal information in it, and a summary of the decision goes out to everybody who's gotten any notice, and there's a summarized version of the appeal period and appeal provisions in that. And with that, I will close and turn things back over. I will shut down my screen and we can turn things over back to Jana.
Thank you, Shirley. And I'm going to introduce Heidi. I'm also going to say that there's about 10 minutes to our first break. But I do know that there will be plenty of time for Heidi to speak. So Heidi, if you can go ahead and talk about the South Tacoma Neighborhood Council and your role.
Hi, everyone. This will be very brief. My name is Heidi Stevens. I'm a board member with the South Tacoma Neighborhood Council. One of the roles of the council is to review and recommend an action policy or plan on matters which affect our neighborhood and provide effective community participation in government, which is why last year our council had submitted an amendment to the city asking for the South Tacoma Groundwater Protection Code to be updated and for new land use zoning to be changed to an economic green zone for this area. Because this is directly above a very large and very important groundwater aquifer water source, which needs proper infiltration and which used to be a large swamp wetland above, which the neighborhood council has advocated for years to be restored. So we and many of our residents we represent were understandably quite concerned when we only recently learned about this permit application. So we requested for this public meeting to inform more residents about the warehouse proposal. And we also asked for the city's notices to be in multiple languages, as well as for the translation services tonight, due to the rich, culturally diverse nature of the South Tacoma community. So I appreciate this meeting being scheduled and for all of you who have joined tonight, and I'll be giving my own public comments later. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Well done. And then Matt, you are next. If you, I'm going to be watching the clock. So sorry if I do have to interrupt you, but otherwise, if you can get done in the next 7 to 10 minutes, then we can take a break before comments.
It will be tough, but I will do what I can. I'm going to share a presentation. I'm not sure if everybody can see it or not. Are you guys able to see the screen?
I can see it, yeah. Some people,
Well,
I think most people were able to see Shirley's presentation.
Perfect, thank you. First of all, thank you to the city. Thank you to the community for coming out and allowing us the opportunity to speak on the project. It's important to us. What we want to talk about today is just a little bit about who Bridge is. Obviously the site history, and I won't go into that too much. Shirley did a great job of recapping that. Overview for the project for everyone and some of the details and impacts and mitigations that kind of get lost in these early permits, but are important to share with the community. So who is Bridge Industrial? Bridge Industrial is a developer and operator of industrial real estate. We were founded in 2000 in Chicago. We are a privately held company and we have 5 offices across the nation and 1 overseas in the UK. Our local office here in the Pacific Northwest was opened in 2018, and the team is comprised of local residents. We all have roots here, and we all care very deeply about the projects and what we are building within our communities. Bridge Industrial, as industrial developers, our buildings are warehouses, and we pride ourselves in building state-of-the-art, best-in-class industrial buildings that are geared towards institutional quality tenants. We also take great pride in designing our buildings to have lasting positive impacts. From the moment we began design on a new facility, we work towards sustainable, resilient futures. This project is no exception. We will be pursuing a LEED certification for this project. And if, for those of you listening aren't aware what LEED is, it's a metrics by which building operators, owners can rate the buildings based on their design and operation and maintenance of the building to make sure that what they are building is economically or environmentally responsible and uses resources efficiently. And while it's great that we're doing that on this individual project, it's not our only one-off. As a company, we are pursuing LEED projects across all our markets. This is also speculative development. We are speculative builders, which means we don't need a tenant in tow for this project. We believe strongly in our product we build and in the Tacoma area as a home for a top-tier tenant. A little less known fact about us that we don't necessarily share is that our equity partner is one of the largest teacher pension funds in the US. We are not some Wall Street company looking to line the pockets of stockholders. The site history, and Shirley did a great job on this. I won't spend too much time, but I will hit on some of the stuff that is important as it relates to the contamination. In the late 1800s, Burlington Railroad moved in and created what would become known as the South Tacoma Shops. Over the next 100 years, the site would be used for various heavy industrial purposes. In 1892, the dismantling yard and rail yard began its operations. The site was used for railcar manufacturing, equipment repairs. Engine and railroad cars were dismantled and parts were salvaged. The shop would continue in that function until 1974. Additional activities that occurred was there were a multitude of foundries on site, and they were operating until 1980. There was an iron foundry producing iron wheels that operated until 1957, and another brass foundry that operated producing journal bearings composed of lead, tin, copper until the 1980s. Beyond the obvious railroad activities, the southern portion of the site also operated as the South Tacoma Airport. From 1936 to 1973, and the area was used for aircraft maintenance and refueling operations. The site, unfortunately, also has a history of various filling activities in the 1930s and 40s in the former swamp bed area that Heidi had mentioned. The areas in some of the contaminants and trash that was thrown in there was from the surrounding foundries, construction on site, commercial and domestic wastes as well. And due to all this, it was entered into the Superfund designation and remediation. Now, this site that you see here is what it looked like before. In the post cleanup of the site ended in what you see on the screen now. It's a little bit of a jumbled colored mess, so I apologize. But through these heavy industrial uses and improper treatment and handling of disposal of materials, the South Tacoma Shops grew to become a heavily contaminated site. It was entered into the EPA Superfund program. This map shows areas of capped materials and areas of remaining uncapped soils. The blue areas on the map represent the soils that were tested above industrial cleanup levels and are capped with a minimum of 1 foot of soil. The yellow areas are contaminated soils below industrial cleanup levels, but above residential cleanup levels, and they are left uncapped on the site. Now, as an industrial zone land, this is a perfectly legal and acceptable level of cleanup and warrants no further action. But this is where Bridge comes in our brownfield approach. We're not afraid to get our hands dirty. While many other industrial developers steer clear of projects that require extensive restoration efforts, we see the potential in regenerating these outdated and often contaminated sites. Utilizing our expertise in revitalizing complex properties, we develop clean and sustainable industrial facilities that attract modern 21st century users, resulting in positive economic, environmental, social outcomes for the neighborhoods, communities, municipalities where they're located. This site, after our development, we can say that will be in a much better condition than it is now. And we'll touch on that here in a little bit as we get into the plans, but just so you can get an overview of where the contamination actually still lives on the site. So the plan of development. There's the obvious, and everyone here is aware of it. We have 2.5 million square feet 4-building scenario of Class A light industrial warehousing for institutional top-tier tenants. And I would love to sit here and tell you about how pretty our buildings are, but I don't think that's the best use of my time tonight. And I'd rather highlight some of the obvious portions of the site that are going to have real impacts on the community and the environment. So for the better part of the last year and a half, there have been a multitude of engineering and design and environmental firms working on the design and function of this project and how to best protect and repair the site from its past uses while bringing it back to the best possible use for the community. It should be said, and it's worth mentioning, that the firms engaged on this design and planning of the project are some of the most highly respected in their area of expertise and have earned their reputations for the quality of their work. And to that end, they have done an incredible job designing and addressing some of the not so obvious details in the project that over the next few slides, I'd like to dive into a little bit more detail. So one of those not so obvious is repairing and restoring the critical wetlands areas that have been degraded and destroyed. The protection of the public and the aquifer by removing contaminated soils across the site and permanently capping them under building and not under just a foot of soil. We are capturing 100% of the impervious stormwater and routing it through enhanced treatment and into filtration galleries to recharge the aquifer. We are also providing substantial off-site road improvements for the traffic impacts. And I wouldn't be a developer if I didn't sit here and say there's a substantial amount of positive economic impacts for the community as well that aren't shown on the plans. So the critical area improvements, we have the existing conditions, and Heidi did a great job of listing out what they are. But the site contains 4 wetlands, 1 stream, and a small biodiversity corridor or biodiversity area in a corridor on the west central portion of the property. What's lost in a little bit of the translation is 65,335 square feet of that is degraded wetlands. They're full of trash. They do not function well. There's poorly maintained linear stream dominated by non-native and invasive vegetation. There's a severe lack of habitat and connectivity due to the existing gravel fills from the previous 100 years of industrial use, wetlands and stream areas with high activity of human disturbances and associated trash and debris, and the limited opportunity due to those compacted gravels and sediments for the sediment and pollution filtration that naturally occurs in some of these wetland areas. And there is no storm treatment, detention, and very limited hydrological connections to the floodplain. So when we do have these atmospheric rivers and we do have these big storm events, there is an impact because this stormwater has nowhere to go, and it floods the areas and it pushes contaminants downstream. Now, our post-development condition is going to be substantial. We are restoring the existing 65,000 square feet of wetland. In addition, we are creating 34,200 new square feet of wetland gain. There's a creation of 23,000 square feet of stream buffer to protect the existing buffer and remove the invasive vegetations. We are restoring 716,000 square feet of the buffer surrounding the wetlands and stream channel areas. We are planting over 13,000 native trees, shrubs, and ground cover, along with seeding restorations of the floodplains. There's planting over 16 acres of wetland and stream buffers are going to provide additional sediment and water quality filtration that the current site and current condition of those wetlands do not currently have. It is going to be an improved floodplain and hydrological connection. So when these large events of water come, there's a place for this water to store, naturally infiltrate back into the aquifer without pushing downstream and causing urban flooding. And I can't talk about water impacts in aquifer without touching on the aquifer impacts and mitigation. This site is located within the boundary of the South Tacoma Groundwater Protection District. And for us, that's something we highlight and we look at right away, because part of our design needs to address the existing contamination in place and the impervious surfaces that we're going to create. We are not blind to it and we don't want to ignore it. We actually want to try and make this site better for the community and for the aquifer. The site stormwater is managed, the site stormwater management design is geared to avoid those impacts. So the first thing we have to do, obviously, is address the contamination, cleanup, and consolidation of it. Now, this is the map that we saw earlier and I spoke to, and we've got highly contaminated areas in the blue and more contaminated areas in the yellow, but they're still below industrial cleanup. The plan for us on this project is to grab all the soils that currently are exposed to the water and the rain that hits that soil and runs down through the site. The soils will be relocated under permanent buildings shown on this slide here. You have building A and building B in those red hatched areas. The soils will be capped underneath those buildings away from any interaction with natural stormwater. Now, there's also impervious surfaces that we're creating to cap that soil. And part of what we need to do is capture 100% of the stormwater like we discussed, so that we have a site-wide stormwater capture and enhancement on site. On the screen, you've got these black boxes here that are hatched. These are large infiltration basins that are below grade and away from the contamination. And we have an above ground pond over here that will allow the water to naturally discharge and work its way back into the aquifer. These infiltration galleries are below the grade. They go through a treatment process before they're re-infiltrated to the aquifer. The typical design treatment for something like this is a 91% of treating the stormwater. This current design that we're working through is treating 100% of the stormwater. That is an exceedance of the typical, and we're very proud of that. We want to continue to push for that. And it's not enough for us to design this. We also have engaged Terra Associates to perform a hydrogeologic study that shows that these designs and purposeful designs will mitigate the impacts from the impervious surfaces. Now this is getting to traffic, and this is a big one for everyone, and it is for us as well. You know, the traffic study model that was produced is, it was initially done for the project all the way back in May, and it was updated in December. The study was based on a heavy use of industrial park, which for this project is a much heavier burden of trucking and cars than traditional light industrial warehousing. And this is done intentionally, since it is a speculative development. The development over the entire project to develop over, so sorry, I'm stuttering.
Hey, Matt, this is a good time to take a break because we need to give the translators a break. And then I do want to get to the public comments. Can you tell me how much time you have left?
I can rip through this pretty quick, maybe 5 minutes.
Okay, so we'll take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back. We'll do the 5 minutes. I'm going to share my screen and with a 10-minute clock on it, and I hope that's what I'm going to try and do. And then we'll come back. Please finish up within the 5 minutes, and we will go into public comment.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we are back. Matt, if you can please just finish up and we will move on to questions or comments. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. So diving into traffic, and I will try to be brief through this section. So our traffic study is based on an industrial park level of service, which is a much heavier and burdened projection of traffic than what we typically would do for a light industrial warehousing and distribution project. And this is an intentional, since this is a speculative project. And to do so, to be overly conservative in our approach and overestimate the impacts rather than underestimate them. The vehicle counts in the study are large, but unlikely that there will be the actual scenario once tenants come into the building, and actual vehicles and trucking will be much less intensive. That being said, just quickly want to dive into the study. The access and circulation that we're planning on this project has the majority of the traffic, as Shirley put earlier, running to the north of the site up in this region here. The trucking traffic is leaving the site onto 35th, going to Highway 16, going to I-5. Car and associate traffic comes also from the south off of 56 and through the north access point as well. Through the study, we looked at 16 different intersections in that level of service study to make sure that all these intersections would or wouldn't need improvements. From that study, the trip generation based on an industrial park use estimates that 5,000 new trips a day. 28% of them are truck, 78% of cars. But again, this is a very heavy, intensive model that we're using, and the likelihood of that being the actual numbers is much less. The reason we want to over entitle and overestimate is to make sure that our impacts and mitigations are appropriately done and overly prepared for. The last thing we want as a partner in the community and with the city is to have a project that is under entitled and under mitigated for these traffic impacts. So the traffic impacts that were identified and have been identified are a variety of them. We have road improvements and roads being built from the north of the park to 35th Avenue. We have extension of Madison Street. We have non-motorized improvements, which includes bike lanes and pedestrian walkways. We have intersection improvements throughout the property. As Shirley mentioned, we have South Madison Street and 56 that's been identified. We have 35th in Union. We have the future intersection at 35th and the North Access Road. And we have signal impacts and mitigations that we've proposed as well. Now, all these are preliminary and will be sorted out, obviously, through the Cipa process. The last thing we just quickly want to touch on is the economic impacts. We had TRC, a company, produce an economic impact study. They used their data based on the IMPLAN model and data. It is a widely accepted economic forecasting model that's been used for 40 years. And the data is very, very important to this community because it's going to impact the local residents and the Pierce County as a whole. The impact study looks at the construction phase and the operation phase. The operation phase is based on a scenario where somewhere in the range of 16 to 2,000 employees per year. To look at the economic impacts from the construction phase first, it is estimated that 2,244 full-time equivalent jobs directly on-site construction and construction-related jobs. There's an additional 772 full-time equivalent jobs related to the development of the project, administrative support. It's 66 million in direct impacts to proprietors and small business and unincorporated business owners and self-employers in the area. 286 full-time indirect jobs from business to business spending because of the multiplier effect of additional funds being pushed through the area in Pierce County. Another 749 induced full-time jobs from increased household spending due to the additional income. In total, we have 4,771 full-time equivalent jobs created in Pierce County, with an estimated 356 million in income and an additional 722 million in output for the community. And that's just the construction side. Once the building goes into operation, those impacts continue. We're anticipating, based on this economic study, that between 15 and 1,800 full-time equivalent employees are direct on-site jobs annually within Pierce County, with the potential of additional $97 to $122 million in income. There's another 365 to 450 indirect jobs within the county, another 274 to 342 full-time induced jobs, and then 2,100 to 2,600 full-time equivalent jobs in total created in Pierce County, with 135 million to 169 million in income and 303 million to 379 million in output annually. Over the 20-year operation of this building, this park, there's an estimated 42,000 to 53,000 annual full-time equivalent jobs, with an impact of 2.7 billion to 3.4 billion in income for the community. This isn't money that goes to bridge. This is money that is distributed and spent within the community of South Tacoma, Pierce County, and the larger area. That really wraps up a lot of what we have. There's a lot to talk about, and it's tough to pack it all into 15 minutes. And we look forward to the opportunity to continue to discuss this. We want to say thank you to the city and also to all the community members who came out to actually listen. It means a lot to us, and it's important, and we appreciate you guys taking the time away from your day to be a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. And so with that, we are going to move on to the public comment period. We have, because of translation services only being available until 8:30, we were wanting to invite persons who need translation services for their comments to go first. Although Heidi, I do see your hand up.
No, that's fine. You can go ahead with that.
Okay, thanks, Heidi. So at this time, because to be honest, we're not sure how this is going to work really well. I don't think it's going to be elegant. We're going to do our best. If somebody, oh my gosh, I'm not sure how to tell if these are who is actually. So I'm going to assume the people, one, two, three, four, 5 people that have raised their hands are persons who will be using translation services. And so with that, Christy, if you could allow John Worthington to speak, and we're going to see how this goes.
Okay, John, you should be able to speak now.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I think the permit should be allowed. I think the permit should be allowed because Vision 2050 oversubscribed residential development, and Tacoma has an obligation to reduce the amount of goods it gets and the amount of nautical miles and land miles it has to travel to get there. So number one reason to allow the permit, the amount of manufacturing and agriculture Puget Metropolis gets from the world economy grows with every sound transit corridor and manufacturing displacement caused by density pursuits and minimum wage increase pursuits. The permit should be denied if the project just serves the world economy and stores products.
Get him out of here.
Sorry, that wasn't directed at you.
If you're just going to be part of the world economy and use the bunker fuel and diesel fuel that for ships traveling 22 days, you should not approve the project. The project should not create more wetlands. Wetlands go bone dry in the summer and provide minimal environmental purpose. The project should filtrate stormwater at a rate that keeps flow. The argument for sediment flow has already been established in the dam removal, so we need the sediment to repair waterfront beaches and fight erosion. We can't have the need of flow and need a wetland or floodplain policy. We've got to pick one, and I think it's better to keep the flow and get rid of the contaminants. local emissions are mitigated by the locals shouldn't be worried about the emissions, because the emissions from the bunker fuel from the ships traveling for 20 days and for 8,000 miles, and the Gulf Stream just brings that pollution right in. And it's further mitigated if this project provides products to Idaho and Montana and Wyoming. The mitigation has a chance to be astronomical. The locals may lament the local emissions while not giving recognition to the mitigation on ship traffic, whose emissions find their way to Tacoma thanks to the jet stream. The EPA wants to exempt ocean emissions for a reason, to hide the environmental impacts of a world economy. All of your Cipa reviews for all your 2020 plan, 2050 plan, they didn't include these ships emissions. The Paris Accord doesn't include the ships emissions. You're not really environmentally sustainable. You haven't built sustainable communities. The permit has a chance to get you on that step if it's done the right way. So I would encourage you to approve the permit and start doing the part of actually building a sustainable community where you get some of the stuff. You know, you design communities that don't have everything right down the block so far. Now's your chance to change that, and I encourage you to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So I can't tell if the individuals that have their hands raised are wanting translation services. So we're just going to go down and hope that the people that need the translation services have gotten in there. Lester Pogue, and I apologize in advance if I misspeak anybody's name, but Christy, could you make it so that Lester could testify?
Hello, I would like to allow, if I can, my 3 minutes to get the interpreters set up. I have a written testimony, but it seems like we were supposed to start with the interpreters or whatever that is. Does that involve them being able to speak, or just by?
It was to allow persons that needed to testify in their native language to have their comments translated here. But but not knowing at this time who it does not appear that the persons whose hands are raised are needing that service. So I'm going to pull an audible and we're going to go ahead and proceed. So Lester, if you would like to go, I will start the 3-minute clock.
Okay, thank you. Greetings and gratitude to the powers that be in governing this proposed bridge industrial project for the opportunity to influence your decision-making. I would first like to tell you that I'm taking this opportunity to voice my objection to this project. Permit number LU 21-0125, and my objection to having the planning director, department director being the sole entity to approve or reject this project. The lack of contribution by our elected officials, that has been the reasoning for the non-discussion of such a potentially harmful development is appalling and doesn't agree with the proclamations, resolutions, and commissions established by the Tacoma City governance to address climate emergency, environmental justice, health justice, and racial justice work the people of Tacoma are demanding. The city of Tacoma's attempt to fast track this project is in direct violation of governance responsibility to act in the best interests of the people of Tacoma. After that statement, I would like to ask questions regarding what the persons promoting this project have stated. What is the job diversity in the jobs they proclaim that will be provided? How is the communities that will be affected by this project included in that job diversity? You know, community workforce agreements. They talk about the labor, and then all the talk about the invasive species, Scotch broom and blackberry. That seems to be a generic effort to kind of influence folks that you guys are just going to be getting rid of blackberry bushes, which are a nuisance in the summertime. You can rent goats to get rid of that. You know, we don't need a $158 million purchase of this property was beneficial for someone. Why is there no transparency on that? You know, this project has not just been going since 2021. It's been in the works since the late 2000s, 2008, and then was refreshed in 2014. There's a lot the public doesn't know, and we'd appreciate transparency from governance in this industry on how this all came to be. We see the road improvements on 56th Street. What are the costs for that? And how much has this development contributed to those costs? Thank you for the opportunity. We need a health impact statement and a health disparity study before this is allowed.
Thank you, Lester. And then next, Christy, can you unmute Moto G Stylus?
Okay, Moto, you should be able to speak now.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Alejandro Fernandez. I live between 6040 and 6050 South Montgomery Street. Currently right now at 4:30 in the morning, we start with our train, our commuter train, starts blowing its horn at 4:30 in the morning. You know, we have JBLM flights going over our head all day long. The noise is there, the traffic is there. We have semi trucks coming up and down 56th Street. It's a really narrow lane for semi trucks. There's a lot of traffic and there's a lot of car crashes on Oak Street. You know, in my opinion, this bridge industrial complex, this massive warehouse should not be allowed to come through. You know, you only have 2 exits for 1,500 or 5,000 vehicles, like the gentleman was saying, that are going to be on Highway 16. That's already jam-packed. It's going to back up the whole freeway into the city of Tacoma, the downtown area. And then you have I-5. You have exits 38th Street and 56th Street. 56th Street at about, I don't know about 38th Street. Some people can talk about 38th Street, but 56th Street at around 3:30, 4 o'clock, you can't even get off that exit. So, you know, there's a lot of environmental impacts that are going to be affected on this, but what about the temperature? I mean, South Tacoma is one of the hottest places in the city of Tacoma. The buildings are not going to make it any better. The pavement on that side is not going to make it any better. There's Gary oak trees that are mitigating as we speak on that site, that are mitigating the temperature that South Tacoma feels. The Douglas fir trees that are there right now, the ground cover, the shrubs, all those have a big effect on the temperature that we have in South Tacoma. And that little property there, that 157 acres is doing all the work for us. Now we're going to put buildings that are going to increase the temperature in this area. We have big heat waves in the summer that this is going to affect. And so, you know, we don't even have, so we don't have the infrastructure from the street. We don't have decent bike lanes. We don't have lanes for people going from Gray Middle School that want to cross South Tacoma, that want to go into that neighborhood. And now we're going to have to put all these semi trucks coming into that area, into that neighborhood, all these car and vehicle traffics going into that neighborhood, all the smoke, the noise, the lights at night from these warehouses, the vehicles at night. So, you know, this is why can't we have something like Point Ruston, that it was capped off? It was a park. It wasn't a park. It was a industrial site that was capped off. Why can't we bring that to the South Tacoma neighborhood? Why can't we bring a nice park, and instead of 4 massive big buildings, And the only thing that this industrial complex is going to leave is 16 acres of a wetland compared to 157 acres that it has. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. You got some extra time because I forgot to start the clock. So Heidi got bumped out of line because we were trying to deal with the translation services, and she happens to be. So I'm going to actually let Heidi have a chance to give her testimony, and then after that, we'll move on to Irene Kennedy.
Thanks. Good evening. My name is Heidi Stevens. I am opposed to this project, and the presentation tonight has only raised more concerns. The negative health and environmental effects of such warehouse centers are well documented, with traffic exhaust resulting in devastating lung underdevelopment in children and other lifelong health and learning impacts. I recently sent to our city council an article titled "Treated Like Sacrifices." This article describes families breathing toxic fumes from warehouse hubs and discusses how low-income neighborhoods are disproportionately affected by industrial growth, which brings mostly poor quality jobs, hordes of trucks, debilitating health issues, and heavy costs to the city, whose residents are then also burdened with paying for road and infrastructure maintenance. So there can be absolutely no additional traffic to this area, which already has some of the worst air pollution in the nation, highest illness and mortality rates in the county, and some of the lowest income, most diverse neighborhoods in the city. To do so would be continued environmental racism. That land is also an important watershed to creeks, but increased traffic means toxic tire residue runoff into streams, killing aquatic life. And just because the railroad shops began a legacy of soil contamination here in the late 1880s doesn't mean the city can continue degrading this land, and should have changed to more environmentally protective zoning long ago. Not only is this in the middle of an urban community, but it's also located directly above a protected groundwater aquifer, which is a significant backup water supply, and it will become even more so in the years to come. Nothing was mentioned about that tonight. Paving over such a large area of some of the last open green space in South Tacoma will create an urban dead zone and another heat zone. We'll lose some of the last means to counteract air pollution and manage water retention, as well as obviously affecting infiltration to the aquifer in this recharge area. The South Tacoma Groundwater Protection District should be the overriding land use policy, and it is a designated geohydrologically sensitive area, yet it doesn't appear that our own Tacoma Municipal Code is being followed regarding critical area preservation, as well as other regulatory requirements, and that should pause permitting. The Cipa checklist for this project is inadequate and incomplete, yet with clear triggers to require a full Cipa process, at which time an EIS and separate health impact assessment must be done. But no additional traffic should be allowed into this vulnerable area, and the city should be obtaining that land to be restored back into its natural wetland state. I will be doing everything I can to make that happen, and I would like to suggest that Bridge Industrial work with us to preserve this land as a corporate example of community service. That would be better PR than building there, and a way to offset other warehouse locations. So seriously, let's talk about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Heidi. I'm unmuted, right? Oh, yep. Okay. And it looks like the next speaker changed. Christy, can you unmute Alex LeBaron, please, so he can provide his comments?
Okay, Alex, you should be able to talk.
Thank you. I can't agree with Heidi more. I've been in this community less than a year, but I can't express how disappointed I am with the project proposal that I've seen before us. We don't need this sort of project for South Tacoma. This will only increase the already terrible traffic situation that we find ourselves with today. And I am severely doubtful that the necessary inspection of how this will impact the community has been conducted. I'm very annoyed that there's some sort of that we've included this sort of corporate mouthpiece to particularly give their PowerPoint on how this will benefit the community, because I don't agree that this is how this should go. I would like to think that everything has been done to, inspect and look into how everything has been going, but I seriously doubt that this has happened. The traffic, the pollution, all of this sort of things are seriously concerning for someone who has moved here intentionally to think, we're not Seattle, we're not a port town. We need to understand that all of the stuff that we are trying to do is, maybe we shouldn't, so in the interim, I disagree that all this sort of stuff that we have introduced and all the impacts that have been introduced are sufficient to make this decision, because they are not. They are seriously deficient in their conclusions. I would like to know how the pollution will impact this community. As an asthmatic, as someone who is seriously concerned with the health effects of all of this, this is something that is not addressed. I don't appreciate someone coming and presenting their own point of view that is clearly involved with the corporate aspects of all this. So that's my time, and I see the last 5 seconds to all this.
Thank you, Alex. Christy, up next is Evan Smith. Can you unmute Evan?
Evan, you should be able to talk now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Evan Smith, and I'm the policy coordinator for the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department. Tonight, I'll highlight some public health considerations of the Bridge Industrial Warehouse proposal. First, we thank the city for listening and hearing resident concerns about this development's possible effects on community health. Listening to our neighbors and our residents is an important step during any project, large or small, because civically engaged people are healthier people. We urge you to consider more public participation and public partnership throughout this project if approved. We ask you to explore with the community how this proposal could improve the neighborhood. Now, we know jobs are good, but development can have other health consequences. So we ask, how can the city and the developer ensure that future tenants become good neighbors and their presence is a community asset, not just an employer? And finally, how will this project affect health? We think about things like air and water quality. We think about walkability and livability. These are important questions that the current development process may not fully answer. 6 years ago this month, under our then Board of Health Chair Victoria Woods, our Tacoma Pierce County Board of Health passed a resolution recommending that the city of Tacoma assess the health impacts of large projects through what has been named health impact assessments. Now, we will provide our official State Environmental Policy Act response to the permit review by April 21st. And in this response, we will formally recommend that the city conduct a health impact assessment for this project. We urge you to take time in this process to truly consider health so that our decisions today do not lead to further poor health outcomes for this community in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Evan. And next up, we have Janine Probazek. I hope I got that close. Thank you, Christy, for unmuting her.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Janine Probazek.
Oh, thank you.
I've already sent my asks in a numerous letters, but I wanted to say my feelings about this. First of all, I'm pretty horrified by this proposed project for this location. And the reasons have been stated, but I'm going to state them quickly again, that the site is next door to a neighborhood whose health is already compromised by pollution. It's a very diverse neighborhood, largely people of color. And we have a history of sacrificing frontline communities. So let's not sacrifice them again. We need to stop that. I'm also sort of disappointed in the awareness of the city planners. And I don't mean to criticize you, but I am disappointed that you hadn't thought that, my gosh, this is the last large piece of land in that whole area. If you stand in the neighborhood and look down, you see this stretch of land that's really quite lovely. And then it's surrounded by cement and buildings and car dealerships and warehouses that you wouldn't have thought, whoa, this is the only land left. And that you didn't think this is already a polluted neighborhood. We can't do that to our frontline communities. Again, we're trying to be anti-racist. We're trying to take serious the climate crisis. So those are my feelings. I also wonder if our codes and zonings are just so out of date that you would have thought that it would have been okay to determine this as sort of an insignificant in terms of environmental concerns. Whether we need to look at that, because we can't stay this ignorant of what's happening in the pollution in our city. I just also wanted to say, in terms of Bridge Industrial, they're out to make money. I understand that, but they are polluting. They will create a great deal of pollution, and they will increase temperatures. Someone had mentioned that. And the promise of jobs is always a carrot. But as we start to turn to more green jobs, there'll be enormous amounts of jobs in that field. That is the wave of the future for all of us. And they won't be poisoning our air or our land or our water. I do appreciate that you had this meeting. I think it's been very hard as city planners to have to deal with all of the controversy around this. And I want to thank everyone who testified today, because I thought it was, I was very proud of our community tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, I panicked in the middle because I realized that we have come up against our 30-minute time frame again. So we will again enter a 10-minute break for the translators. And I will set my screen, and I'll try to remember that I'm sharing it this time. And yeah, I'll set a 10-minute clock, and we will see you back here at 10 o'clock to remain with going with comments. Welcome back, everybody. We did have a request that I name out the three people, the next three people to speak, so that people will be prepared. Absolutely, we'll start doing that right now. Also, I want to mention that we have the translators till 8:30, so that was actually our last break. And John, you have your hand back up. Could we go on to the people that haven't had a chance to speak and then come back to you at the end? That would be my preference. Thank you. So that means up next we have Hunter Henderson, and then after that Randy Mole, and after that Esther Day. So Hunter, you are unmuted.
Good evening, y'all. My name is Hunter Henderson. I've lived here in Tacoma my whole life, and I plan to die in this city. I've seen many changes, and I know that right now we're on the point of no return with the climate crisis, and our city needs to focus on longevity, not just for the economy, but longevity for our communities and the wildlife around us. Compared to other areas, South Tacoma Way in the South Tacoma area is way behind on reaching the city's goal for canopy coverage, and developments like these put us further away from our goal, and they can also displace communities. For example, I watched the Starlight Theater swap meet be torn down and displace an entire community, and that building still remains empty today. And now recently in my own neighborhood of Hilltop, I've seen the Tacoma News Tribune being torn down, and instead of that land being used for affordable housing or to create more green spaces, it's also being used to create another logistical center. There is also a logistical center that was built off of the Spanaway Loop, and there's one being planned in Graham. How many more of these fulfillment centers does our community need? It seems to me like Tacoma is constantly pushing out disenfranchised communities to the brink where they do not have any place to safely exist. Tacoma needs affordable housing, and Tacoma needs to be able to protect the environment for the people of the city and for the wildlife that call it home as well. We will always find a way to generate more money through businesses and other provided services, but we will not always be able to reverse the damage that is done by previous generations in the name of progress. The site in question, the bridge site, is a Superfund site, and it is one of Tacoma's first Superfund sites because Tacoma has been one of the dirtiest places in our nation's history. We can change that around and become better. We just need to put our policies into practice and operate in the community with good faith that we are looking out for the interests of environmental stewardship and protection. We need to focus less on generating money for the economy and generating wealth for the community, and that includes wildlife and people. So that's really all I have to say. I just don't want to see another community, especially low-income communities, displaced by poor land plan management and land use that is allowed by the city of Tacoma and its officials. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Hunter. So we have Randy, then Esther, and then Cheryl. Randy, you're unmuted.
Awesome. Thank you. This is actually Jamie. I'm on Randy's computer.
Okay.
How would you know? Cool. So anyway, my name's Jamie. I'm calling to echo the sentiments of most people who are advocating for environmental justice. Obviously, this is a huge, or maybe not obviously, but to me, this is an obvious, huge environmental injustice. And wrapped up in that is like environmental racism. And, you know, this is directly affecting the frontline community of color, and a place that's already affected by poor air quality. Again, just echoing sentiments that have already been said. I want to speak directly to Bridge. My comments, it seems like there's an exodus happening from Illinois, where Bridge is originally from. The company is based in Illinois, closed a lot of their facilities, sold a lot of their facilities, and now are making an exodus to the West Coast. We don't need them to save our economy. We don't need them to come into our community and save our economy. And so that narrative is damaging and ineffective, in my opinion. And this land, while it is undergoing remediation, doesn't mean that it's lost. What we know about nature and ecology is that it's a natural cycle and it will prove itself. And I'm very much interested in that cycle being a closed loop and not being intervened by bridge industrial. It is a groundwater aquifer. So if cement is laid, that means the groundwater infiltration of water is not going to be able to complete its cycle, which is going to have a permanent effect on our ability to have rejuvenated water source. Whether or not they rehabilitate 16 acres out of 150 acres for net zero ecological function, it is not going to keep our water safe. It's not going to keep our air safe. They mentioned in the presentation that the traffic flow is a gross overestimate. And then they went on to talk about economic production. And what is to say that that isn't a gross overestimate? The amount of jobs, the amount of money that's going to flow. If they're saying traffic is an overestimate, then I would conjecture to say then also, yeah, everything else is an overestimate. And we don't know what the number is going to be, but we can say that we have land that can be remediated, it is being remediated and serves function to its immediate community. And we need to keep that safe as a community. Tacoma needs to keep this safe for Tacoma. We don't need to have bridge come in and affect us in this way. Our people, our land, like our water, this is ours, and we need it. And so that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for hosting this and hearing our voice. I hope that we keep having our voices heard. And I hope it rings louder than this false narrative of money. Thank you.
Thank you. So up next we have Esther, and then Cheryl and Kopek and Catherine Lanziello. I'm sorry, I probably butchered that.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I am totally against this project. As a person who worked in development, I will tell you that the best laid plans of mice and men don't always pan out. The plans that Mr. Gladney has provided are wonderful. The estimates are great, but they are just numbers. We must protect our water aquifer. Above all else, money is irrelevant. You cannot survive without water. I've also seen military convoys get off the interstate and go through some of our areas to get to other parts of the freeway because traffic is so heavy. That's happening now. Also, the Puget Sound Clean Air people do not maintain plenty of monitors for us to be able to ascertain the air quality in all of Tacoma. Having worked in King County, in Seattle, they had only 2 monitors in all of Seattle, one in the Duwamish and one in North Seattle. I could see the particulates in the air when I would look outside the window. The air quality in South Tacoma will be further compromised. Our children and our people need clean air to live. Our wetlands need to be protected. There is another wetland area close by in Midland that was promised to be mitigated and worked on, only to create flooding now to some of the homes that are nearby. That's a catastrophe. We cannot tell what nature is going to do because Mother Nature will do what it wants to do. But we must protect our water aquifer. We must also keep our children safe and keep this 8th largest in the world warehouse distribution center from being built in our backyard. We deserve better. And we appreciate that you're looking at our properties in Tacoma, but not in my neighborhood. Thank you. Cheryl, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Okay, so I live in South Tacoma, and I was driving west on 56th Street towards this property, towards this location the other day, and there was this huge truck driving south on South Washington Street, and it needed to make a right turn at the intersection of 56th and South Washington. And it basically blocked all directions of traffic while it slowly made this turn, and it had to be slow because it had to due to the size of the truck, it had to occupy lanes that were already occupied with cars. So those cars had to move while this truck made the turn. And then the truck went on to make a right turn onto Burlington, which just repeated that same process. And all I could think of while I watched this was, oh my Lord, what if there are like even 25 trucks of this nature making the same kind of maneuver through this intersection every day? What kind of a disruption would that be? And, you know, this area is very densely built. There is no room to widen roads or add lanes or anything like that. And if we're going to say that, well, we can just reroute traffic and add more traffic lights and everything, I think that's pretty much a non-starter for people who travel through that area frequently. It was, you know, it was a huge mess for this one truck. Imagine that happening over and over and over all day through that intersection. And as one other person has remarked, we already have empty warehouse space, you know, just sitting vacant. It's brand new, newly built, bright and shiny. Nobody's occupying it. So what makes us think that anybody's even going to want to occupy this space? What if nothing happens and then, you know, we've just ruined this area for nothing? So those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So next up we have Catherine, and then after Catherine, we have Crystal Monteros and Sharon Knight.
Hi, I just want to make sure you can hear me.
Yep.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Lanziello, and I'm a resident of South Tacoma. I actually live just one house off of 56th, not very far from where Bridge Industrial would be slated to be built. I have huge concerns about air pollution, noise pollution, temperature, traffic, and safety. If Bridge Industrial in the city of Tacoma were to sit on 56th Street for a day, I think you would see already how very loud it is. I feel like hasn't been expressed enough just how loud 56th Street is. It's hard for anybody who lives near it to be outside in their yard, enjoy the outdoors, open their windows, and just get air in, not even because of just the noise, but because of how actual dirty the air is. You could wipe a finger across my windows that face 56 and just see how dirty it is. And I can't let that air come into my house. That's the air that we're breathing in our neighborhood. On top of it, 56, like somebody said, is a narrow road. Yes, it's 2 lanes on each side with a turn lane in the middle, but we have absolutely no trees up and down 56. It's sidewalk right against this road. And it's already a sidewalk that makes, I think, many people nervous to walk on because of how many cars go by. And bringing on that many more semis and that many more cars is going to cause so many problems within our neighborhood. The city, somebody else brought this up, the city has talked about adding trees within the city of Tacoma to increase our canopy. It feels like that's something that's kind of being ignored with South Tacoma, and hearing about this plan with Bridge Industrial, it also feels like we're really taking a hit when it comes to better air quality in our neighborhood. Dune Peninsula was a super fun site. I don't see why we can't do something similar in our own neighborhood that needs it, that desperately needs more green space. I'm a TPS educator, and so I already see, and I'm a TPS educator in the South End, so I already see the inequities that the children of South Tacoma have. And this is just going to add to it. It's going to add to health inequities. It's going to add to quality of living inequities. I love South Tacoma. I love this neighborhood. I love this community. And I don't like that decisions about it are being made by people who don't live here, who don't know what it's like. And so I ask that the city really think about the use of this land, that having more warehouse space isn't going to make it better for us. It's not going to make it better for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. So next up, we have Crystal Monteros, and then Sharon Knight and Barbara Church.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Crystal Monteros. I've been a resident of South Tacoma for more than 5 years now. South Tacoma is one of the most diverse areas of Tacoma. The community here relies on each other and its resources. If this project continues, people like myself, who are a minority living with a disability in one of the lower income areas of Tacoma, will lose access to the safe transportation system that we have fought so hard to get in this area. The plans for a safer community that we have worked so hard to build will be shifted because these plans will no longer need to serve just the residential areas that we have always had in mind. Please keep South Tacoma safe for those who are forced to walk from point A to point B. Our environment and community does matter. And on another note, since I have more time, I did want to say that I am one of those people with disabilities with health precautions, I should say, due to all the pollution and smoke in the air. With just all the exhaust from the trucks that are going to be going back and forth, and right now, just the cars in general, I have hallucinations. They're called minor hallucinations from the gas and smoke and everything in the air. It's caused from cigarette smoke, from like weed smoke, and from smoke. But the more that is in the area, the more that's going to affect me personally. And I'm not just saying, people in general, but this is me personally. I have been hospitalized several times for this, and I am on medication for it, but there are many people that I know of in Tacoma just like me suffering from this. And it's not caused by us having bad health. It's literally caused by the pollutants in the air. And I didn't have this up until 3 years ago. I've lived in Tacoma for 15 years, but 3 years ago, the doctor literally said it's because of the smoke that you're around. If you're not around smoke, you won't have hallucinations. So the more smoke that is in South Tacoma, the more I can guarantee you I will have hallucinations. And that's coming from me. That's the end of my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. And so we have Sharon up next, and then Barbara Church and Joseph, I think it's Tiger.
Hi, my name is Sharon Knight, and I actually, until recently, was a Tacoma resident, but I live now in University Place, right down the street from where this site is going to be. And I did see that truck trying to turn the other day. I was coming from the South Tacoma branch of the library, and it blocked traffic in 3 lanes, and it took me several minutes to get through the intersection. But I would like to thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. And I'm very concerned about Bridge Industrials. I think that was a very slick presentation that they gave, and I'm sure that they have many people who can put together those presentations to give to you. But I'm wondering, what kind of tax breaks are they going to get from the city for coming? Are they getting any tax breaks?
As I mentioned at the beginning, we're not going to answer any questions during the presentation. We will gather up questions from the recording and from the Q&A, and questions will go on to the website at a later date.
Oh, okay. Now, Matt said that he had just an estimate for the cars and the trucks for this project. So an estimate means he could be over or he could be under. 56th Street is already tremendously crowded. If you drive at any time after 2:30 on a weekday afternoon, it's overcrowded. And I'm wondering, have you talked to the people in UP? Because that's a main way for people in UP to get to I-5 and to get back home. It's going to affect everybody in UP who come up and down. And I only live just 2 blocks from Orchard Street, so it's a main thoroughfare for me. And it affects all of us. And then my other thing is that all the jobs that he says we're going to get, he doesn't know who's going to be moving in. But how many of those jobs are actually going to be there as we move into automation in warehouses? You know, this could be all smoke and mirrors. There could be some real people jobs, but a lot of those jobs over the next 5-10 years may be going away as you have automation in warehouses. So I'm concerned about that. And then again, I'm worried about the people in South Tacoma. They deserve better from the people in the city of Tacoma. You need to be taking better care of them. So thank you for allowing me to speak. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Absolutely. We have Barbara Church up next, and then Joseph Tiger and John Utz.
Thank you for listening and having this forum. My name's Barb Church, and I actually went into the South Tacoma neighborhood to let people know about this project. And I went to so many houses and people didn't even know. And these were houses that were right next to the project. So I appreciate that people did come from the neighborhood and that they're listening and sharing what their fears are and their living situation. I just wanted them to know that I hear them, and I hope that the city of Tacoma also hears them. The one of the big pieces of opposition on my part is well, there are a lot of them, but the truck traffic. Several city council members have always said that truck traffic was the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, and the city has a climate action policy that if those emissions are added, then they would not be following their climate action policy. Environment is always important to me. And during the 2015 drought, the Green River, which was our main water source, was really, really low. And so the community really had to kick in and do what they could to conserve water. And it's really important that we protect our aquifers. For those people in this South Tacoma area, that area was redlined. It has a higher concentration of Black, Hispanic, and mixed race, lower income people, and the highest cancer rate than other parts in Tacoma, the worst air pollution nationally, highest illness and mortality rates nationally. And so this is really a huge consideration, especially when the city of Tacoma has an anti-racist policy. I think that they need to really look at that. This is, if you ever read the book Color of Law, this is exactly what happens in industrial areas like this and that community and BIPOC communities. I want to speak to the health department and acknowledge and appreciate that they are listening to the community. They did say something about recommending that they require that there's a completion of a health impact statement. And the mayor was on the board of health, and the word that was used in the resolution that they made when she was mayor was that the health department, the city of Tacoma, consider to require the completion. So recommend versus require. I would hope that you would require the completion of a health assessment. Thank you.
Unmute. Next up, we have Joseph, and then after that, John Utz, and after that, Lucas Barfield.
Hi, my name is Joe Teeger. I'm a little bit put off by well, first, I'm pleased to have this opportunity to speak. I was very put off by the indication, the impression being given that once a site falls within its zoning, that denial of the permit is somehow or other very difficult by the city, when in fact, the primary responsibility of government, of any level of government, is protection of the health of its citizens. There is no doubt, there's more than 20 years of data by the National Institutes of Health, many other scientific institutions, both in the United States and abroad, that air pollution, particularly very fine particles, sometimes abbreviated with the symbol P 2.5 microns, meaning extremely small particles, have on human health. What most people do not realize is when they breathe in, the things they breathe in, you do not get a complete exchange. These little tiny particles stay in your lungs. Diesel particles are not just dust. They are incomplete combustion containing many, many carcinogenic chemicals. Ingested by mothers, pregnant women, small children, these particles lodge in the lungs and over time contribute to cancer, neurological development, delayed neurological development, lower IQ, long-term health effects like COPD and asthma. A city's primary job, again, is protection of the health of its citizens. It is not necessarily the protection of their economic development of their community, but the health of their community. It is a trust responsibility of government. There is something called externalities. It's an economic term meaning costs that a business or industry passes on to the public at large. It's very nice to talk about the speculative economic impacts of a project like this, but I haven't found these people willing to talk about the public costs of a project like this. The delays in traffic are part of it, but the increased public health costs are also part of it. And they are not borne just by the community, but by the individuals. There are children out there today that will be subjected to 20 more years of truck traffic. Just for the fun of it, I took that number of trips a day times 365 days a year by 20 years. 36,500,000 vehicle trips emitting every day for 20 years. There is no currently available technology to mitigate those impacts. The only mitigation is no project. And until that happens, this project should not be allowed to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we go to our next speaker, I want to take a minute to thank our translators. It appears that at this time we haven't had any people usually in the rooms for the translators. And so they were scheduled till 8:30. We're going to go ahead and let them go just a little bit early. Again, I want to thank them for being patient and staying in the rooms during this time. And then I also want to let you know, I think we have 9 more speakers left. So we're gonna get through those 9 speakers. Sometimes if we finish early, I let people go a second time, but considering that we're gonna run late tonight, we're gonna stand by the 3 minutes per person. I do see in the chat about Timothy Smith having his hand up, and we will. Oh, he keeps slipping to the bottom. We will make sure that Timothy gets a chance to speak. Sorry about that. So that's just what I wanted to say. We're gonna stay here through the remaining people that want to speak, even though that'll go a little bit past 8:30. That's fine. So we will make sure that Timothy gets heard. I don't know why it keeps slipping to the bottom. At this moment, we have John Oots up next, and then Lucas Barfield and Michelle Mood.
Good evening, everybody. It's Jonna. It's Utz as in Foots. It's German. My middle name's
Thank you.
But pretty good. Nice job. Nice job. I also dearly love the timer. It's big and fat and helps really frame your argument. All right. So, wisecracking engineering joke. The optimal location for the bridge project is in a municipality somewhere that actually wants it. I live a little north of 6th Avenue, and I go to South Tacoma a lot. I love it so much. Yes, it's a little rough. And boy, I sure the heck stay away from 56, because 56 is grim. When I looked at the map and the proposed routes into this project, I was astounded. There is just no way that you're not going to have 80 bajillion diesel trucks sitting there for hours. Long Beach, Southern California, they have the same problem. Terrible pollution. South Tacoma is a bowl. So all that stuff, particularly in an inversion condition, is just going to linger in there. And that's just not fair. That is just not fair at all. I'm a engineer who is a part of a family that's been in finance for 2 generations. So my brother's the guy in finance and I'm the poor guy. So when I looked at this thing, I went and looked at Bridge Capital's website, and I saw that they were a United States company, and then they have an office in London. And I went, oh, holy heck. They opened that office in London to collect Russian oligarch loot and invest that. So this may fall over simply because their Russian oligarch clients that I assume they have in London who may put money in may have that money impounded. So what else did I want to say? So the other thing about this to consider is that this is a place where money, warehousing is the place where money is sloshing into right now. When you think about the 70s, money was sloshing into making malls. Then when you think about the 80s, money was sloshing into making movie theaters. My mom used to sell these real estate investment trusts, and I would say, hey, there's way overbuilt. And she'd say, shut up, I don't want to talk about that. So what could happen is this thing could get built, and then 10 years later, it'll be derelict. So let's use our land a little more smartly. Thank you so much, and have a pleasant evening.
Thank you. And because we've already got Lucas unmuted, so that's great. Because Timothy keeps getting pushed down to the bottom, I don't know what's happening. After Lucas, we're going to let Timothy go. He's been very patient. And then after that, Michelle Mood.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, I'm blind, so I can't see the timer. So can you give me like a tap or something when it's 10 seconds?
Sure.
Yeah, hey, thanks. So yeah, my name's Lucas Barfield. I live here in South Tacoma. I've lived in Tacoma since 2005. I love it here. I never thought I would end up living here. It's my favorite place I've ever lived around the country, but I grew up in Alabama, a really small place, and I actually grew up in the shadow of a pulp mill, kind of like the one we have here in Tacoma. And that thing would get so stinky that it would choke you down some days. And I really feel like it killed our pine trees. We had to chop them all down because the pine beetles invaded the trees because the pollution from the pulp mill weakened them. I'm pretty much convinced of that because it was like an entire forest that was facing the pulp mill. We used to be able to go down to the river on a hot day and it'd be like chlorine sheen right over the top of the river. And, that's kind of the environment I grew up. It's Alabama. There's no environmentalism there. But I met some people from Washington as I started growing up and ended up, my college professor was from Seattle. I got a degree in environmental policy in Pensacola at the University of West Florida. There's a lot of Superfund sites and brownfields there. So part of my education was kind of talking about that stuff. It was really interesting to hear earlier the presenter say that they bring a brownfield approach to a Superfund site. I'd never heard that before. Because a brownfield is just like a vacant lot. 157 acres is not a vacant lot. So I'm not sure who came up with that analogy. This place over here, as we can see, the community does not want it. People have brought up 56 being grim. I live right here on 56. It is very loud, very noisy. Like I mentioned, I'm blind. I can't cross the street. I met somebody, another quick story. I met somebody about 10 years ago that ended up being my coach in a sport I do. She chased me down like 2 blocks, yelling my name, or yelling, hey, 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 because I could not hear. Now, I have really good hearing because I'm blind. And right there on that street, you cannot hear because it's so loud. All the trucks, all the cars, horns, everything going on. And now let's talk about the pollution. So a Superfund site, you guys are going to dig up the dirt with all that pollution and get it flowing around in the air. Just right now, we got some new windows. I was really fortunate to get some new windows over the summer. We have to clean them every 2 or 3 days because just the particulates in the air around here. We have a filter in the summertime because of all the smoke and everything. This community is a community of focus. And I have to tell you that I was very disappointed in the health department's testimony earlier. And I think somebody mentioned this. As a person with environmental policy background, I can just hear how the health department and matter of fact, the city, you guys are leaving the door way too open for this project. So let's not do the project. It's going to hurt people with disabilities, poor people, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So thank you. That's my testimony.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think I said we would unmute Timothy next, and then we'll go back up.
Well, I'm just going to keep, my name's Timothy Smith. I was twice elected to the South Tacoma Neighborhood Council. I'm going to pick up on what that brother was just like hammering down. I believe that, you know. I hope Matt's still on here from Bridge, right? Matt, are you still on here? Hope he is. Anyway, you got to get your hands dirty if you're going to come to South Tacoma. We're all immigrants and people that aren't allowed to live anywhere else. We've been redlined. We've dealt with the industry. We've dealt with the polluted community, and we love South Tacoma. I know I do. I got to tell you that there's no way that this current proposal for this permit should go forward. Matt, you from Bridge Industries. I mean, here's the thought. You're Bridge Industries. So are you a bridge to the 19th century or a bridge to the 21st century? Because we live in South Tacoma. We've been poor. We've been hungry. We know what we got to do to our neighborhood. So we're asking, if you're going to come here and you're going to spend this money, buy this property that we've been watching, we want your help. We have concerns. We have an aquifer that's precious. It's more precious than anything. The code already says, the city code, the city law says it has to be maintained at the highest standards of purity. We have a Tacoma water system that's owned by the city. It has wells that we're trying to upgrade and improve and protect. The city, the residents that lived in South Tacoma put forward a year ago, before you even submitted your permit, and Shirley Schultz can say it's not true, but it is true. We already were working on doing an upgrade to the groundwater protection district and trying to propose not to be objectionist, but say, if we're going to look at and protect the groundwater, then we're going to do something that creates an economic green zone. So Matt, you want to build warehouses? We want to be green. We want to capture every single drop of water that comes from the sky and put it in the aquifer. We want to capture every single electron that comes from the sun and put it into the energy system. We want everybody who's going to have a job at your warehouses that you're proposing that lives in South Tacoma, and you have to help us build the houses. Why is that so wrong? Why should we just have to accept diesel trucks when we want electric trucks? Why should we have to like turn down the railroad that we own in Tacoma to feed your plants? We want our railroads to do it. We live in South Tacoma. We understand industry. We are industrialists. We are the children and grandchildren and people who've come from immigrants who've built the railroads and built the industry. We want something better now. We want a green economic zone. We want water we can drink. We want a place where our kids can play. There's nothing wrong with asking for that, Matt. So tell your bosses, please, because the city won't listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Timothy. So next up we have Michelle Mood, and then Kathy Lohan and Stacy Oates.
Hi.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Michelle.
Michelle Mood. I'm one of the 975 residents who received a notice, and it does say that it was application complete January 3rd, 2022. Application received May 28th, 2021, and the South Tacoma Neighborhood Council was not informed. I would like to ask the city to give some kind of a metric or ruler, official explanation of the threshold, either scientific, mathematical, or otherwise used for determination of significance or non-significance, what scale is used. I would also like to note that Bridge Industrial's advertisement for this site notes that the site is 1 mile from Washington Route 16. Most warehouses are much closer to freeways and do not go through residential areas. This one will. So that's a problem. I will also say the reports seem extremely sketchy, and I would ask all offices to look very carefully at them. The maps are not fully labeled. Some of the conclusions based on the data don't jibe with the data. So yeah, I've been very concerned about that. I also will note that their own Sound View biologic assessment says that the watershed cumulative actions that increase impervious surfaces can have an overall negative impact on hydrology, which changes in hydrology from increases in impervious surfaces can reduce water infiltration and dilution. So their own Sound View biological assessment is talking about reducing the recharging of the aquifer, what is likely. Finally, I will just say that 44% of Tacoma's greenhouse gases currently come from transportation. And obviously this will make it worse. Oh, I did want to say that Shirley Schultz had told us that zoning is put together in these kind of 20 to 40-year chunks of time. I don't know when this area was last reconsidered for rezoning, but I do know that it actually is still the sacrifice zone from our racist history and has not been changed. So I guess that's what I wanted to say. I will say that a lot of people are complaining about traffic. I think the city will just turn around and say, okay, yeah, we're widening the roads, don't worry. So I think we really have to think more in terms of really thinking about justice and environmental justice and the whole orientation of the state of Washington towards redressing past wrongs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Kathy Lohan, and then after that, Stacy Oakes, and after that, Kathy Irwin. Kathy, are you there? Okay, let's go on to Stacy Oakes.
Yes, hi. My name is Stacy Oakes. Oh, and that's Trayvon in the background. And we would just like to agree with all of the comments that have already been said. I think it's pretty obvious that there's, again, complete opposition to what's going on here. I just want to reiterate that there's no way that this shouldn't get a full public health analysis. And that needs to be done before things move forward any farther. We also need to make sure that the determination of non-significance is changed. It's insane that that would be allowed to be the case, especially if we're getting something that would be the 8th largest in the world, regardless of what it is. It seems like you'd have to look at the impacts of something like that. There's, a list of reasons why something which should be changed to have a determination of significance. And I'm pretty sure that Heidi has actually already emailed those in. And so those need to be given attention. We know that the people going to be most impacted by this are going to be communities of color, low-income communities. And it's so opposite of all of the things that we hear in city council meetings as far as, what we're trying to be, the kind of city we want to be. We're working on equity, we're working on racism, but clearly we're not. We like to talk about it, we like to give out proclamations, But this is where you actually make changes, is in things like this. Like it's been said before, just because someone applies, it is not the city's job to rubber stamp it. It's your job to really look at it and to use your full abilities to stop it if it doesn't look like it's what the people in the city want, or if it's not good for everybody. And clearly this is not. Again, the idea of water protection, we talk about, they talked about that it'd be like in 20 years, it'll be this many jobs. 20 years from now, is it going to be more important to have the water from the aquifer, or is it going to be more important to have another warehouse complex? And like somebody pointed out, there's already more than we need already. So it's just, it's very short-sighted thinking that seems to be happening. And I think also too, again, somebody else brought up the quality of jobs. That should be considered. There was a recent, I think it was John Oliver that just did a thing on like how terrible it actually is to be a trucker, and the amount of harm that's actually kind of goes into that job. People get suckered into doing it, and then it takes their livelihood. And same thing with warehouse workers. We hear all these stories about Amazon workers not even being allowed to take bathroom breaks. These aren't good jobs, and it can't just be, this is the total number of jobs, that means it's good. So I think that there should be some sort of study into that, and more of a quality around the jobs being looked at in some sort of way. I'd also like to suggest in the future, when the city is doing presentations like this, that it's not just the person that's going to be making money off the project that talks. If this has been in the works for over a year, that's enough time for you to get somebody from public health department to speak at this meeting as well. We should be hearing from them on impacts. It's enough time to have somebody be able to speak to the water impacts from this. It's insane to just kind of get this one-sided view, basically like an infomercial, Oh, I see my time has stopped. So thank you so much. And please do everything you can to analyze all the impacts and to stop this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, it looks like we have Kathy Irwin and then Vivian DeSwager. I probably butchered that. And then, yep.
Hi, this is Kathy Irwin. And can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I agree with a lot of what people have already described for health concerns, environmental concerns, traffic concerns. Also, one thing that hasn't been talked about is I think a lot of people's understanding is that the traffic and the activities at this complex would be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week is what we've heard. So that means total 24-hour busy area that's now going to be created. The other point I want to bring up additionally is that the way this whole project is being portrayed with Kidder Matthews brochures is that they're showing other access routes that would be available to access this whole warehouse area, including Route 7, which is Pacific Avenue. And they've showed all these different possible routes that people can use, trucks can use to access the warehouse site, seemingly ignoring the fact that all of these would be traveling through neighborhoods of people. And that is very alarming. In evaluating the position, the location of this facility, other warehouses in North America, according to a recent article, a blog that was done that mentioned the 11 largest warehouses in North America, many of them are located away from residential areas and do not require access through residential streets. Many of them have their own on-ramps or limited business access to interstate routes. This is the only one that I have seen that is listed that requires a mile or more through residential areas for even access to the area. So that is very concerning because this seems like a very inappropriate site for a project of this size. Another question I have is questioning whether this is really truly a light industrial project given the size of the warehouse space buildings And then also the fact that the amount of truck traffic in and out with the light and noise factors, if this is truly a light industrial site as it is being described. So all those are concerns. And I think, as I said before, I think it's very alarming how this is being advertised to potential companies that want to lease space there as to what's going to be available to them throughout Tacoma. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. So then next we have Vivian, and after that, our last speaker tonight is Kathy.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hello, my name is Vivian D. Swager. I'm a longtime Tacoma resident. I live right off of 38th Street, actually, and Alaska. And I see the impacts that just from I-5 being constructed and you know, trucks trying to come through on my street to get to where they're supposed to go. And I can only imagine what that's going to do when there's more semi trucks that are coming in trying to find where they're supposed to be in South Tacoma. This is a opportunity for the city to make a green space for South Tacoma, for our community, for our children. And I just want to reiterate that everything that people have said tonight about the impacts for the people in this neighborhood. I will keep it short, but please, this is an opportunity for Tacoma to have a better green space, better space for the community to come in and walk in, and for the wildlife. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Kathy Lohan, and then we've added also Sean Arendt.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Oh, whoops. So can my dog. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you both for a great public hearing, and 3 minutes is such a luxury. We always get the feeling that nobody wants to hear us at council. So, and I want a big shout out and thank you to Bridge Industrial for focusing on this piece of land that needs love and not concrete. Questions about Bridge Industrial, and I wish somebody would answer it here. I mean, this is part of why we're here. We have presentations, but of course, most people are not going to see the answers to the written questions that are going to get. I don't know, maybe they'll get posted somewhere, but I want to know, and I really appreciate the caller before that talked about the financial scrutiny, that he has a brother that can do numbers. And, you know, we have what some people call a stranded asset down in the port with that LNG plant. Methane is destroying the, you know, the jet stream, and it's becoming so clear now that we cannot do this, that it's not so. And we tried to tell people and nobody listened, and it was like, you know, probably 95% and 5% so against it, like, you know, and we spoke up and just got hostility back. You know, the people need to be listened to, because sometimes we're right, and let's not do that again with this one. You know, stores now are not even like the shelves are really, there's a lot of empty shelves, even in, you know, local stores now. I've never seen anything like it. So, you know, maybe it's the non-wave that we're having with COVID, that there's not enough people for the ferries, and there's not enough cops, and well, there's a lot of reasons there's not enough cops who would want to do that. And there's just, you know, things have changed now, and bigger is not always better. This is 2.5 million square feet, what, the 8th warehouse wonder of the world. You know, I don't know how Tacoma comes up with such really bad ideas, but you know, the answers might be in the financial situation. Did I hear the bridge industrial guy say something about teacher pension funds? And also TNT, there's a story up right now. I haven't had a chance to read it. I think it's from today on this project. I appreciate their coverage. Please, I would ask them to ask these questions. Who are the funders? Who are the insurers? Who are the bankers? Is there, and because of the situation now, Alberta, Canada, where it we used to be a public housing building. Now we're privately owned, and it was done in secret by the way, 99% by the last I heard, a huge so-called insurance company in The Hague. That's who literally owns the Alberta, Canada building. But you know, top secret kind of stuff, you know. So we don't want that here. We need to know. This thing about Russian oligarchs, that's a screaming headline to find out what the hell is going on with that. I can't see a timer.
Yeah, the timer did just end up. Sorry, I was muted.
How much time do I have?
It's out. The timer went out.
Oh, okay. Bigger's not better. You know, please don't do this. That aquifer is so important. Let's remediate the land. And thank you, Bridge Industrial, for focusing this city on it.
Thank you, Kathy. So our last speaker of tonight will be Sean Arendt.
Good evening.
Hi, Sean.
My name is Sean Arendt. I chair the Eco-Socialist Committee for Tacoma DSA. I think what we have here is a pretty classic example of a capitalist coming in and, you know, destroying the middle of a community. If this was about community control, which I think this fight is, people don't want, you know, more traffic on the streets. They don't want more pollution in the air. And yet these are things that we're all going to have to pay for so that this speculative developer can make money. You know, the city is currently in agreement with the Department of Ecology to study the South Tacoma Channel, to study restoration in terms of restoring flow to the Fleck Creek, and install testing wells at this site to see if recharge is happening for the creek. I can't imagine that happening if this entire thing is paved over. It's going to create a ton of stormwater. It's going to overwhelm the current system. Now, how is it right that BNSF gets to pollute the middle of a community, remediate half of it, just cap it, and then turn around and sell it for profit? Does that sit well with anybody? So maybe we lose the polluted soil, but we gain some polluted air. I don't really think that's a deal that South Tacoma wants to accept. So I don't think this project is right. Look, that land's been sitting empty for a long time. But let's give it back to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. And Shirley is going to do well, first, I will say thank you for everybody that took the time and has stuck with us. Shirley is going to do a quick closing for tonight's meeting.
Yeah, I wanted to do a couple of things because of timing and questions that we had in the Q&A for documents. I'm going to post a slide without the URLs, but things you can Google, and then we will put the actual links on the webpage, but that might take until Monday. So I wanted to make sure I gave people the information to Google. So hang on a second, and I'm just going to leave it not in presentation mode. For EPA documents, the thing that I would use in a search engine is EPA South Tacoma Field, and that will get you to the homepage for the entire Superfund site. So this is one unit of the Superfund site that gets you all of it. There's lots. It's you can spend quite a lot of time reading there, and I've done that as well. The second would be, there was a question about the South Tacoma Groundwater Protection District section of the code. It's not gone. It just moved. So and in fact, most staff use the online city clerk version, and I always just end up Googling, or yeah, it's Google, South Tacoma zone or Tacoma zoning code, and that gets you to Title 13. The Groundwater Protection District has moved to our overlays section. It's not 1307 anymore, which is what I think it was. Although it might have been 09, 7 might have been something else. Anyway, it is there, and we'll get you the correct link to the zoning code onto the webpage. Third is this webpage, which is Bridge Industrial. So it's cityoftacoma.org/Bridge Industrial. We will get the meeting recording up as soon as possible, depending on what the Zoom people do and the YouTube, and there's some stuff. Hopefully that'll be tomorrow. It might be Monday before the recording is up. And then on a personal note, I want to thank the people for the comments about staff and the staff presentation. And I want you to know I took it to heart, and it's a learning experience. It's a balance between being super technical and being really, really lengthy. Like, we could have probably had our traffic engineer talk for a full hour. I could talk about land use for an hour. Our biologist could talk about the critical areas for an hour. And also just allowing people the chance to give oral comments. I'm pretty sure this time I aimed a little bit low on the bar, and we'll do better next time. So I appreciate that comment. Meanwhile, the FAQs, the answers will all be in writing. We will get them on the website as soon as possible. Everything will get responded to in any eventual decision that's made by our department director. And that's it. Thank you so much for everybody who sat through and listened and had comments and were really articulate and polite and smart. And for everybody that's been that way in the email comments as well. I appreciate that.
Thank you. And with that, we will close tonight's meeting. Thank you for your time.